everyone. My name is Tristan Brown, and for the next 5 minutes, I'd like to try to tweak your lens a little bit of how these initiatives come to fruition. And hopefully, you'll leave with some more data about how these initiatives occur, and use this information to really maybe look past and beyond the substance of the initiative and ask maybe the question of why is this appearing or not. People's inherent distrust of government has been a staple of our history here politically. The first recall that we saw in the state was actually written into the Los Angeles Charter in 1903 and was utilized back then. In a huge wave of corruption that was seen in the early part of the 1900s, you saw a lot of corruption from railroads in all levels of government in California, and grand jury indictments were now being called upon and led by a young attorney named Hiram Johnson, who later rode that wave of the progressive movement to become governor in 1910. And at the same time, this is when we saw the recall, the referendum, and the initiative come to be arrows in the quiver of the people's political power against a corrupt government. But what I'd like to do is maybe chip away at the romanticized idea of what an initiative is and how they actually come to be. For instance, the Progressive Revolution in itself was really a breakaway from the then Republican Party. They had a lot of inherent organization. They were able to implement their change very rapidly. It wasn't necessarily a homegrown grassroots out of nowhere movement. They had a lot of money, especially from big U.S. steel interests. And that's how really the movement came to be. And at the time of enactment, to bring the initiative, referendum, and whatnot into our Constitution, you were required to have about, well, you need 8% of the vote for the last gubernatorial election to do a constitutional amendment. You need 5% of the vote in terms of how many signatures you need for a statutory initiative. At the time of enactment, that was around 85,000 signatures for a constitutional amendment, and 53,000 signatures, or about 7% of the voting age population of California in 1910. Nowadays, you need just over 807,000 signatures for a constitutional amendment and 504,000 for a statutory initiative. That's about 2% of our voting age population. And you think about 1910, you're not necessarily standing in front of Target, Walmart, you are on a horse, most likely trying to find voters to sign these petitions. So it wasn't necessarily ever easy, and it wasn't built this way to be easy. In addition to the amount of signatures you need, more effort is put in what kind of language is in your initiative, often needing legal advice, either privately or through the state legislative counsel's office. And there are also requirements to have them look at your language and craft an initiative. You need to be able to deal with the fees for the Attorney General to get ballot title and summary. And there's often litigation over what comes out of that process. You need 150 days to collect the signatures. And if you want it on the next ballot, you need to do it at least 131 days ahead of time. This time crunch and the resources that are needed to actually make an initiative happen really places that effort out of the reach of this kind of romanticized grassroots group of individuals that want to place new legislation on the books of California law. I take a couple of examples. Prop 28, which you heard about tonight on the term limits, the proponents spent $2 million just about in total to have that initiative placed on the ballot. Out of that $2 million, 1.6 of it was spent on collecting signatures alone. Signatures are collected in one of two ways. Rarely by a volunteer effort. Usually that signifies a labor union that has bodies to be able to dedicate time, but oftentimes that does require a lot of money on the union's behalf at any rate, and then also paid signature gatherers. And I think most people see a signature gatherer and think after high school students or somebody just trying to get a part-time job. These are actual professionals. And the joke is that they're these political gypsies, and they do move from place to place, state to state, selling their labor to initiative campaigns specifically, looking for the best per signature commission that they can. And commissions have ranged from as little as 40 cents per signature and can go up to, we've seen $5 per signature in certain races. It depends on how much time you have to collect and the, let's say, substance of the initiative, if it's radical or not. Most recently, Molly Munger, who's trying to pass a tax initiative in response to the governor's new tax initiative, where they're paying, I think, $3 a signature right now. She's told all of her petition gatherers, once a week, I'm going to draw a name of whoever does the best signature gathering, and you get a free car. So these are the things that go into getting the actual signatures. It is a completely unregulated market, and there are ways that you can utilize this market if you're being a bit of a strategist on either a proponent or opponent of an initiative. For instance, if you want to run opposition to an initiative that's collecting signatures, you have a few options. You can run an interference campaign, you can run a counter initiative, or you can do something that's pretty much a decoy. Interference is often tried but rarely successful. In full disclosure, I'm a political director of an SEIU local, and we've done this where in the paycheck, I forgot what they call it. We call it paycheck deception, but in that effort, when they were collecting signatures, we would have members spot these signature gatherers, call an 800 number, and then a education team is released and dispatched to that location to educate the voters on what signing this petition really does. In that effort, SEIU spent $1.3 million doing this interference campaign. The proponents spent $1.1 million for their signatures, and probably that number would have been a little bit cheaper had we not run the interference, but that drove the price up. Counter initiatives are probably more useful by either having an initiative that counters the substance of one initiative, or even better, is a decoy to say something like, well, I'm going to put an initiative out there that saves baby whales for whatever reason, and I'm going to pay $5 per signature. So the gypsies that I referred to earlier are going to have more of an incentive to collect signatures for that measure rather than the real measure that might be paying $2, $1.50, whatever's in the bank for those proponents. And they will not be able to qualify their measure in their 150-day timeline. This is the world of petition signature gathering. It's a bit of an industrial complex at this point, and something I think is food for thought. That is this really still a tool of the people, or is this something that's now just relegated to special interests, special well-moneyed interests, either both big labor, big corporations, or very wealthy single donors, when you need at least $1 million to place an initiative on the ballot? Thank you.
Okay, who's the best now? All right, we have two more